Everybody should pat themselves on the back because you made it to another Friday. And here we are on a Friday afternoon in the greatest city in the world, New York City. Evan and Tiki on the Fan, and it is a Friday. And while half the city may pack it in and not show up to work, we have a very special Friday program here on Evan and Tiki. Because coming up at 4 o'clock, we crown the king of almost champions as we've been counting down the most beloved almost champions in New York sports over the last 40 years. But that's not all. In 1 hour, you just heard the midday show talking about it. Sal, intellectually bankrupt Licata.
Intellectually bankrupt.
Takes on Sean
I'm a fat moron.
See, he says it, not me. Morash in Tiki Presents Jeopardy. The Jeopardy board is here. Thank you to Tiki. Thank you to Tiki's wife.
Tracy Johnson.
Thank you to
She does
Tracy.
all of the work. I do nothing except for come up with the questions because that comes from my brain.
I mean, that's a big part of the job, though.
It is probably the most important part of the job, but it looks aesthetically pleasing. And we have an update on our board because it's evergreen now. It is Velcroed. The topics are Velcroed.
Very
so
nice.
We can reuse this over and over and over again.
So we will have that for you in about an hour. More on it as the show rolls on. But there is one thing that matters coming out of last night. There's one thing that matters this morning, and there's one thing that matters this afternoon. Knicks fans, it's not that you lost to the LA Lakers. I don't need to hear, because you're going to hear it from haters. And while I may be a hater, I call it like it is. Stop listening to this. They can't beat good team garbage. It doesn't matter. You didn't beat the Thunder? Who cares? You haven't beat the Celtics? Who cares? You didn't beat the... It does not matter. That's not the story out of last night. I'm even, because I'm a nice guy, not going to bash Karl Anthony Towns, who put together one of the worst performances he's had all year. Because you know what? Life gets in the way sometimes. And unlike that douche Draymond Green, I'm going to have compassion and say, Cat may not have been there mentally last night, so I'm going to give him a mulligan. And I'm not even going to get on Mikal Bridges. Last night's loss, and yes, it was bad, I guess, in terms of game action and blowing leads, that ain't the story. The only thing that matters is the ankle of Jalen Brunson. And Tommy Lugauer said it to me privately. He is willing to have his ankle amputated today and have it sent to L.A. so Jalen Brunson can take said ankle. Now, it's a very nice gesture, Tommy. The Knicks have said no thank you. They don't feel your ankle is up to par. But that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
And this isn't a good thing. This doesn't help all their guys. No. There's nothing good about an ankle injury. There's nothing good about your best player, the undisputed king of New York City, being hurt. So right now, if you're a Knicks fan or a basketball fan, you are praying to the basketball gods that Jalen Brunson is okay.
Well, you're also panicking a little bit, not because the season is close to being over and he's not going to be available for the postseason, but this is starting to feel similar to what happened a year ago with injuries lingering around. We don't know what's fully going on with Josh Hart, especially with the inconsistencies and the lack of confidence from downtown. But we speculated a couple of days ago, perhaps it was a lingering whatever patella issue that he has with his knee. We now have Jalen Brunson who's down. Karl Anthony Towns is fine physically, but he's kind of banged up at least for the last couple of days emotionally. And like the last thing you want is a repeat of what happened a year ago if you're the Knicks. And that is we're really good. We're right on the cusp. But when push comes to shove, our guys aren't available.
Right.
OG's coming off that foot issue, which seems to not be an issue. But who knows if it crops itself back up at the most inappropriate time. So to me, it's not something to worry about. It's just in the back of your mind. You're just saying, not again.
No, absolutely. The not again feeling is legit because you hit on it. The Knicks, forget Jalen for a second, are dealing with nagging injuries and guys are playing through it. And you don't want that piling up once we get to the middle of April. But Jalen Brunson is the engine of this team. He's the unquestioned MVP of this team. And we had this argument a couple of weeks ago in terms of, well, who is the MVP? Is it Cat? Is it Jalen? To me, it's not a question. Jalen Brunson is the MVP of this team. All you need to do is watch the final 4 minutes of any close game the New York Knicks play. Because basically their offense, by Tom Thibodeau is get the ball to Jalen and he'll do cool stuff. Now, last night, in the final few seconds of regulation, the Lakers sent a double, and Jalen made the right basketball decision and got the ball to Josh Hart, who just unfortunately didn't beat the clock. But Jalen Brunson is everything with this team. So hopefully we're going to get an update today, or we're going to get an update tomorrow. And here's what this update's going to mean, because I did some research on ankle injuries. There's a grade 1 ankle strain or sprain. There's a grade 2 ankle sprain, and there's a grade 3 ankle sprain. And we could take the grades and we could call it something different. So, for example, a grade 1 is 1 to 2 weeks. We call that awesome news. We call that great. Jalen gets a respite, takes a deep breath. Screw the West Coast trip. If you lose a few games, you'll survive. And Jalen comes back before the baseball season starts. So grade 1, I say we have a celebration.
Agreed.
Grade 2 is 3 to 6 weeks. And I call that, it's getting a little dicey.
Yeah, but I feel like it'll be on the short end.
You think so? Oh, so the 3-week angle of it?
Yes, only because of Jalen Brunson. It's just he's a dog, as Loogie likes to say, and he always finds ways to push through injuries. We saw it last year.
Yeah.
Right? So I would say 3 weeks, even though he's going to be hampered for the remainder of the postseason if that's the case.
And that's why I give the reaction to it. So just to play the calendar game, the NBA playoffs begin in 43 days. That's right. I'm counting it down. In 43 days, the NBA playoffs will begin. Now, technically, the Knicks could begin it in 44 days if they start the postseason on a Sunday for them, but you get the point. We are 6 weeks away. So it's right on the back end of 3 to 6 weeks. That's why I say in terms of, okay, he should be back for the playoffs, but you're cutting it close. And you do want Jalen back, not as the playoffs are starting. You'd want him back with a few weeks to spare. And then you've got what I like to call the out-and-out disaster, Giannis stepping on Kyrie level disaster grade 3 strain, which is 6 to 12 weeks. And if that's the case...
Yeah, he's done.
I don't know if I'd say done.
Well, here's the thing.
I'd say we're in trouble.
Are they getting through the first round of the playoffs without Jalen Brunson?
It's a great question, Tiki.
I can't say with confidence that would be the case.
I think so. Here's what's funny about this. I look at the standings, and I believe that the standings in a weird way can be overrated. I've said this a few times. Tommy's kind of argued with me about it, which is fine, that if you're the 3 seed, whatever. If you're the 2 seed, whatever. I don't think there's a big difference. I'd even argue there isn't a big difference dropping a 4. You could argue they're better being a 4 seed. You'd avoid the Boston Celtics in the second round of the playoffs. If we're getting into a world in which Jalen's out, and now you're asking me, hey, are they beating the Pistons? Are they beating the Bucks? Are they beating whomever in the first round without Jalen Brunson? Then the seed matters, because now it depends on the opponent, honestly. But if Jalen's back for the postseason, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think it's a big deal if you're the 5 seed. Now, I don't think you're falling to the 5 seed, not suggesting that. I'm just telling you, I wouldn't get nuts about the standings. But if Brunson isn't playing, and now we're breaking down a Nick Piston or Nick Buck or Nick Miami or Nick whatever series without Jalen Brunson, then the opponent makes a big difference. With Jalen, I think you beat any of those teams.
It's all about the second round with Jalen back. So it's either they play the Cavs or they play Boston. I'm not saying that you look past the first round opponent.
Sounds like you just did.
But unlike in years past where there was a Miami with Jimmy Butler or even the Sixers last year, I kind of put Milwaukee, even Atlanta now after trading Hunter, the Magic are a disaster. Milwaukee, I don't see one team out of that Detroit that stands above the rest that should be afraid to play or would give the Knicks a matchup problem.
Without Jalen?
No.
Well,
I'm saying if Jalen comes back, like you were saying, they're the 5th seed.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if Jalen's back, to me, it's all about the second round. And it doesn't matter who the first round opponent is because you take your chances. If he's out for a month, you live with it because you're not going to be able to control your seeding as much if you don't have your best player.
It's the grade 3 that you worry about because that pushes him probably not fully healthy into the first round. So he's likely not to play that much, if at all. And then you're worried about who picks up the production for Jalen Brunson in the first round of the playoffs, regardless of who you're playing.
Well, then you could lose the series. I mean, I agree with you, not to look ahead or not to be cocky, but if the Knicks have a healthy Jalen Brunson, I don't think being the 4 seed or being the 5 seed makes that big of a difference.
I agree.
It does affect who you play in the second round, and honestly, you may be better off being a 4 or 5 seed because you do avoid the Boston Celtics as opposed to Cleveland, despite their 10-game winning streak.
I was just about to say, I've not criticized, but I've been reluctant to put Cleveland in that tier 1, but they win every single night.
Yeah.
So at some point here, you got to just say that the Cleveland Cavs are as good as Boston. I mean,
think you can say that, but also simultaneously say, I feel better in a series against Cleveland than I do Boston.
Yeah, because you've seen Boston win an NBA title.
Yeah,
And in your gut, if you said who's better, Boston or Cleveland,
Boston.
Everybody's going to say Boston.
Yes,
mainly because they're the defending champions, but also they just feel like it, and
Absolutely.
they've proven it, and they're battle tested. Look, I mean, it took them a long time to get to and win a championship.
Yes,
and a lot of the team is seasoned while still being young to being a championship quality team, whereas the Cavs haven't done it yet.
Right,
now, they're good. They got the roster to do it, but they haven't done it yet.
They're basically, and the Knicks too, you could argue, are in the process of being Bostonified.
Yes.
It took the Celtics a while. Maybe this is the year Cleveland puts it all together. I don't know, but if you ask me, and I think you will ask most other basketball fans, they're going to take the Celtics. They're the team to beat in the East. So falling seed-wise, because Jalen's out for a few weeks, is just not that big of a deal. Now, that doesn't mean when you watch them tonight against the Clippers, you don't care. Of course you care. But I just don't think that's the death sentence. The death sentence is if Jalen Brunson is not playing on April 19th. That's the death sentence. If Jalen Brunson is not healthy and leading this team in the playoffs, that's where you get worried. Because ultimately, and I guess this is where you pivot a little bit to Mr. Karl Anthony Towns, I have personally been very critical of how he disappears in the final few minutes of games.
Yeah.
And I'm going to exclude last night because you know what? Last night he had a rough night to begin with. God knows what's on his mind, considering the personal issues he's been dealing with. So I'm going to look at last night and say, I'm not counting that. I'm looking at every other night. And you could argue it's Jalen Brunson and the offense runs through him, and basically it's Jalen running the show. Well, for the next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, we'll see. This is Cat's team.
Yeah.
And so in these close games late, all the criticisms I've laid at the feet of Karl Anthony Towns, there are no excuses.
Right, but is this Cat's game? I know he's a big who can distribute, but is he creating like Jalen Brunson creates? It's what we're going to find out. I'm asking this question, not knowing the answer, and just questioning whether or not his game evolves in the absence of Jalen Brunson to be that distributor.
Well, he's not Jalen Brunson from that standpoint, but in the final 4 or 5 minutes of games where the Knicks have been great, really until last night, they've been electric. They've been one of the more clutch teams in the league. In fact, when they've lost all these close games, when they've lost all these games to good teams, they haven't been close games, right?
They got blown out.
They haven't lost a close game to Boston.
No.
But they have been so good in these close games. What will Cat do now when they play a close game, let's say tonight, against the LA Clippers? Now, he's not Jalen Brunson, but can he find ways late in games to not disappear?
Well, this is where he gets to truly prove, because I think he's disproved that whole Jimmy Butler nonsense from their interactions in Minnesota, not being a dog, not being someone who's emotional on the court and can step up in the moment, because he's done that for a lot of the season. But now he gets a chance to disprove that notion publicly because everybody will see it, right? I know Miles McBride, Deuce, is a good player, but he's not Jalen Brunson filling in for him. And so if there is the alpha that's going to be on the court scoring-wise, it's got to be Cat, and he's going to get a chance to be the man for the first time this season. And if he does it, then Knicks fans, don't worry. If he doesn't and he shrinks a little bit, then you got to be worried.
Well, it makes you also confident. Let's say he is the alpha that they're going to need him to be over the next few weeks. It makes you feel better about what he can be when Jalen Brunson comes back. Because I've noticed it, and I know it hasn't been a big deal because the Knicks win these close games, but the guy's a non-factor in the final few minutes of games. He just is. And so maybe that confidence changes if he can have success in a role like this. The one guy I don't want to hear about as far as being the alpha is concerned, because he's not, and I know full well he's not, is Mikal Bridges. Now, does Mikal Bridges need to be better? Yes, he does. Does Mikal Bridges need that to not disappear throughout games? Yes, he does. But if you think for a second that the alpha late in these close games can be Mikal Bridges, I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you.
Well, maybe he does step into that role. I didn't even think about him being that guy, because that's what he was asked to do when he was in Brooklyn.
How'd that go?
I mean, it wasn't fantastic, but it's a different. I mean, you're also in Brooklyn where What? Like halfway through the season, you're like, what the hell are we even out here for? We know we're not good enough to win these games. But now he's in New York, and they're a good squad, and they're well coached, and the expectation from the fans and media and everybody else, even internally, is extraordinarily high. And so you find out a lot about yourself when it gets put on your plate and you have to help raise the bar for the occasion. So maybe he does. I didn't even think of him because we keep talking about Cat and Jalen Brunson's absence, but maybe it is Mikal Bridges.
Who needs to step up? And to the Knicks fans out there, forget the loss. Don't let the loss bother you. I'm telling you, you'll forget about it in a few days like it didn't happen. This is all about the ankle of Jalen Brunson, when he will come back, and how they replace him if, God forbid, he's out for a while. How worried are you? We'll hear from the Knicks fan at 888-808-1019, and we will also hear from somebody else. Late in yesterday's program, we heard from Draymond Green. He had something to say about Karl Anthony Towns. He had something very ignorant to say about Karl Anthony Towns. Well, after the Golden State Warriors, it may have been before the game. I'm not actually sure if it was before or after, but that's irrelevant. Let's just say after. After the Golden State Warriors survived the test from the Brooklyn Nets in Brooklyn, Draymond was informed about how ignorant he was, and I thought it was fascinating on how he would handle kind of explaining himself for what he said yesterday about why Karl Anthony Towns missed the game against the Warriors and what he would say once he was told the truth. Well,